Welcome to Bible Study. This is the study we're preparing for July 27 in 2025 at St. Michael's Lutheran Church. My apologies last week. We just were not able to get to creating a video for our study. We talked a little bit about Jesus' difficult words about marriage in Mark chapter 10. And there we came to find that sometimes really difficult words, sometimes things that sound like they're really harsh, are in fact part of Jesus' grand program to say something really good to us. Today, as we look at another difficult passage, we are looking at one that in this instance I think is just almost inexplicable, and really raises questions for us that need to leave us probably faced with challenges that we shouldn't necessarily think we're going to answer. What's more, I think it is one of those passages that ought to give us a measure of humility in front of the text, in front of God and in front of His Word. We're going to be looking at Exodus chapter 4. This text actually came to us as a suggestion from somebody, not a member of the congregation, but who is listening to these videos from elsewhere. And they emailed me and said, hey, could you look at this text? I'm confused about this one. Exodus chapter 4. We're all familiar with this story of Exodus 3, and we really do need to back up that far. Because in Exodus 3, Moses, who has been miraculously rescued in a sense from the persecution of Pharaoh and the genocide that he's perpetrating against the Hebrews, and he was rescued from the river, and then he escaped when he was 40 years old. He fled from the justice of Pharaoh, and ended up in the wilderness, becoming a shepherd. And he met a fellow named Jethro, who was a leader of the tribes that lived out there, married one of his daughters, Zipporah, and had another 40-year part of his life, a chapter of his life, in which he was a shepherd. Now here he is, and if the chronology is accurate that we are reading here, he's 80 years old, and he is tending the sheep. And he has this encounter with a burning bush. God speaks to him and says, Moses, I'm sending you down to rescue my people from bondage in Egypt. And God gives him at that point a number of signs to do. He can turn a staff into a serpent. He can turn water into blood. All of these things that will ultimately become the 10 plagues upon Egypt. And Moses is empowered to go and to do this. So we pick it up here in chapter 4. And the first part of 4 is when he's given these powerful signs. But now, in verse 18, let's start there. Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, please, let me go back to my brothers in Egypt to see whether they are still alive. And Jethro said to Moses, go in peace. For me, this passage already starts out odd, is that Moses is not upfront or forthcoming with the real reason behind why he's going. He doesn't tell Jethro that he has had a vision of God and that God has given him this mandate, this command to go and free God's people from bondage in Egypt. He couches it as, I'd like to go down and see if any of my family are still down in Egypt and if I can reconnect with them. It's been a while. I need to get to see them again. And Jethro, being a family man himself, says, sure, you should go. The Lord said to Moses in Midian, go take back to Egypt, for all the men who are seeking your life are dead. So now we have another thing has happened. God has said, well, Moses, go ahead and head back because all the people who were trying to kill you 40 years ago, they've all died. So Moses took his wife and his sons, he had them ride on a donkey, and went back to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the staff of God in his hand. And so you have this picture of this little family moving along, riding a donkey, Moses walking beside with his staff. And the Lord said to Moses, when you go back to Egypt, see that you do before Pharaoh all the miracles that that I have put into your power. But I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. You know, Moses had all of these amazing signs he could do. He could put his hand inside his vest and pull it out, and it would have leprosy. Put it back, and it would be whole again. And he could do these seem almost like magic tricks, but they're more than that. They're demonstrations over the powers, the natural powers. And the Egyptians worshipped those natural powers. And so a lot of these signs, the plagues that Moses is going to do, are in fact really a frontal assault on the pantheon of the Egyptian gods. But God says, I will harden Pharaoh's heart. Does God do that? That has always caused some people trouble. It seems as though God is what? Condemning this man? That God is not allowing Pharaoh to repent? I will harden his heart. I think in the larger picture of things, this is actually not as problematic for me. Because of the very nature of what Moses was there to do. Had Pharaoh's heart been softened, and Moses would have come there immediately, and Pharaoh would have said, sure, take him out, let him go, and he would have let them go, God would not have had the opportunity to say some things that God needed to say. The resistance of Pharaoh, the hardness of Pharaoh's heart, his unwillingness to bend in the face of even the dramatic signs that God was doing, gave God the opportunity to do more signs. Each one of those plagues that Moses visits upon the people of Egypt are in fact running right through the various, catalog of gods that the Egyptians have. I mean, the whole purpose of the plagues was not only to visit them upon the Egyptians, yes, but was even more so to really tear down the faith that the people of Israel probably had in those gods. They had been there for centuries. They had assimilated into that culture. They were worshiping those gods. And so God needed to disconnect them. And the way that he would do that was by these demonstrations of power and say, you believe in this God who is the God of the Nile River? I'm stronger than that. I am the God of the Nile River. You believe in this God who is the God of husbandry, animal husbandry? I'm bigger than that. I will cause all the cattle to die. The Egyptians had all kinds of gods. They had sort of a frog god and a bug god. They had many different gods. And systematically, the plagues go through there. The biggest god of all, of course, for the Egyptians was their death god. That's why they built all those pyramids. And of course, the last plague visited on them is the death of the firstborn. And the fact that Moses was the one who called for it, and that Moses was the one who said, now to the Israelites, do this Passover lamb, and the angel of death will pass over you. That he could control that was an enormous statement to the people of Israel about just who their God, this Lord who's rescuing them from Egypt, really is. And so the fact of Pharaoh's hardness of heart isn't as problematic for me as some have made it out to be. This was God creating a space where he could say some things he needed to say. But this next little passage is the one that really caused the problem for my emailer about this. Verse 24. At a lodging on the way, the Lord met him and sought to put him to death. So they've gone on this journey. They've stopped somewhere at some lodging. And we don't know what that might have been. But they're stopped there, and God shows up, and God wants to kill Moses. And you say, what is going on here? Moses is your guy. Moses is the one who you're sending down here to rescue these people. Now why do you show up and want to kill him? Then Zipporah, Moses' wife, takes a flint and cuts off her son's foreskin and touches Moses' feet with it and says, "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me." And so he, presumably the Lord, leaves him alone. It was then that she said, "a bridegroom of blood," because of circumcision. What is happening with this story? I think we all have this very human need to make sense of something. And there have been a lot of attempts at making sense of this, some of them more successful than others. It seems that Moses hadn't done what God had commanded him to do, although we don't ever have a command spoken directly to Moses in this first part that he should circumcise his children, but God had commanded that to Abraham. And what's odd is that Zipporah, this non-Jewish or non-Israelite woman, she knew about it, and that she recognizes what's going on, and she's the one who fulfills the obligation. The Lord said to Aaron, "Then go into the wilderness to meet Moses." And so he went and met him at the mountain of God and kissed him. And Moses told Aaron all the words of the Lord which he had sent him to speak, and all the signs that he had commanded him to do. And then Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders of all the people of Israel. Aaron spoke all the words. Moses apparently had something of a speech impediment. But the Lord had spoken to Moses, and he did signs in the sight of the people. And the people believed. And when they heard that the Lord had visited the people of Israel and that he had seen their affliction, they bowed their heads and worshipped. And I wonder, what did Moses tell Aaron about that event at the lodging on the way down to Egypt? What is that little story about? There are many stories like this sometimes in the Bible where God does something that just seems so out of character, out of nature, and so shocking and surprising. And you say, "Why, God? That doesn't make sense to me." I come back to those words of Moses, or of Augustine on these things, in which he said these wrinkles in the text, these things that just won't lie flat and neat like we expect them to. They're there because God would challenge us. And God would give us a measure of humility in front of this, so that no one can stand up here and say, "I got this all figured out." That's certainly one way to take something like this, and probably is the place all of us ought to start when we come to a passage like this. Does it suggest that maybe Moses is not as thoroughgoing of a follower of Yahweh as we might imagine? Remember, he's only had the burning bush experience a short while before this, and he's pretty new to this whole game himself. Does he need this violent or this dangerous encounter with God in order to really understand the gravity of what it is that he's doing? Was this simply a threat to kill him that God had no intention of fulfilling, kind of akin to the near sacrifice of Isaac on Mount Moriah, in which it appears that maybe God was testing Abraham? Was this a test of Moses? And in effect, did Zipporah pass the test? I don't know. Those are all rationalizations, and I'm not sure that's what the text is trying to do. And so I leave this one a little bit with this frustrating lack of resolution. And I'm quite willing to say, I don't know. We're going to have one of these again next week for the 3rd, but then we're going to take a little bit of a break. I have many things happening at my house and my family over the next several weeks after that, and some things have to give a little bit, and this is one of them that's going to give for a bit. We'll pick up again with the videos come the end of August, when we're going to pick up a book of the Bible study, and we'll pursue that into the fall. God bless you. Have a blessed summer.